My guest this week is all about this. She's a proper doctor, but she's also on the cutting edge of using psychedelics in healing. Welcome to the Mainly Moonology podcast. I'm your host, Yasmin Boland, an award-winning astrologer and the Sunday Times best-selling author of books including Moonology and creator of the Moonology Oracle cards. My intention for this podcast is to help you understand how you can create your dream life using mainly Moonology, the moon, as your guide. So I am so excited to be having this conversation today. I'm bringing you a guest who I met when I was in Sedona earlier this year. We met through a mutual friend. We had dinner. And Beth, for that is her name, Beth DuPree, Dr. Beth DuPree. Beth gave me a copy of her book, The Healing Consciousness. And it's such an amazing book. And I've actually been listening to it on Audible as I walk around my local area, taking my dog Jonty for a walk. And it's really just a litany of amazing, amazing experiences that Beth has had. Let me just give you a little bit of background before I let you speak. Okay, Beth?
Go for it.
So Dr. Beth DuPree, MD, is currently serving as the Chief Medical Officer of Inner Still Health, Caliber Medical and Gateway Sciences. Like, she's a proper doctor. She maintains her staff privileges at Redeemer Health, Huntington Valley, PA, and MD Anderson Cancer Affiliate. She's board certified in general surgery and integrative and holistic medicine with 35 years of experience in the surgical care and management of breast cancer. Her career has been committed to treating diseases of the breast with state-of-the-art Western medical technology. So, and it goes on. There's so much more. General surgery, Albert Einstein Medical Center in Philadelphia, certificate in psychedelic-assisted therapies and research, which is what we're going to talk about today, and more and more. So, but let's start off by talking about your book, Beth. How is it that you wrote this great book when you are a breast cancer surgeon? Are you just talented at everything, or did you have some help, or it just wrote itself, or what's the story there? And what's the message of the book for those people who might be interested in reading it?
Well, thank you for this. The book started out as I started journaling back in the late 90s. It was part of just really me kind of figuring out who I am, what I am. I started having all of these experiences that I was actually aware of, really being conscious of it late during my surgical residency into my private practice. And so I started journaling things. And when I was on a cruise to Greece for my 40th birthday, so we're talking 22 years ago, I was with James Van Praagh and Brian Weiss, and we were on the Voyage of Enlightenment on the Wind Spirit cruise ship. And during that trip, the one evening, we had just left Kushadasi, Turkey, and we're headed to Greece. And we rescued 2 Afghani refugees from the middle of the Aegean Sea. Mm-hmm. And that night, after the Hellenic Coast Guard had picked them up, I woke up, I went in the bathroom, and I didn't know what automatic writing was. And it just started. And it was boom. Like, my hand couldn't go as fast as my brain was going, but it wasn't even my brain that was going. And I started writing, and it's actually one chapter which was completely unedited. It was just boom. And, I woke up the next morning, went back and read it, and I was like, where did this come from? And my conscious left brain was like, okay, you're a surgeon. You don't need to write a book. You have no reason to write a book. And honestly, from that time forward until the book was published, which was several years, I would be woken up at 4:44 in the morning. That's my angel number, 4:44. I'd wake up and I'd start writing. And then after I wrote what I needed to write, I was able to go back to sleep. And my girlfriend, Chris, had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And I really felt compelled to write this story because she was a huge part of how I learned about what healing was, as opposed to curing and treating, which is what we do in Western medicine. It's how we're trained to do it. And Chris was such an important teacher on that journey. I finished it. I finished the book, I guess, in 2005, that January, and gave it to Chris to read, which she read it and she loved it. And then she passed away in November of 2005 on All Souls Day. And 2 weeks later, I got 2 emails from different people about publishing my book. And I was like, okay, this is bizarre. Oh, now my girlfriend's in spirit. Now I got this, you know, desire or whatever. And I reached back out to the publishers. And so that was in November of 2005. I held the book in my hand in June of 2006. And you as an author, that is pretty quick.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
really
is
quick. It was a labor of love. It was basically wanting to be able to share these stories of healing and synchronicity and synchrodestiny and spirituality with my patients, because I couldn't sit in a room and tell each patient every story, but I was able to write the book. And so that is how that book came to being. And
Right.
it wasn't like it was on my punch list of things to do in my life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the fact that you are very cosmic. I know that from reading the book, that there's all these synchronicities that you followed. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it's things like, finding the exact right office space at the exact place that you needed it for the exact amount that you wanted it, and this sort of thing. I don't know, that kind of, those synchronicities that, happens to people when they're kind of being on the magical path. But how did you feel about your kind of expansion into this side of life? And also your colleagues, they're pretty straight-laced, a lot of doctors. The medical community tends to be very straight-laced and even a little bit wary of anyone who's a bit sort of cosmic. How's that been for you? Has that been an issue, or are people just gone, oh, no, that's just Beth, or how is it?
I'm sure it depends who you talk to. There's a lot of different people that have different thoughts and beliefs about me. I spoke at my national breast cancer meeting, I believe it was in 2004, the first time, about the importance of integrative care of our patients. And I was on the main stage in San Diego. Some people would say I was going out on a limb, but I was going out on a really strong branch of a limb of a tree that I believed that my colleagues could benefit from. And
Mm.
afterwards, so many of my colleagues came up to me and said, wow, I've had the same thoughts. I really needed to hear this. When my book got published in 2006, I've saved the cards, the emails from so many of my medical colleagues who said, thank you for speaking your truth, because I've had similar experiences, but I haven't been brave enough to talk about it.
And
And
just to be clear here for people who haven't read the book, it's basically the idea that Western medicine can cut out the tumor, but there's a lot of other healing that needs to be done when someone is unwell. Does that kind of sum it up?
right. And in Western medicine, we have really perfected acute care, like a ruptured spleen, a ruptured appendix. But when it comes to chronic illness and mental wellness, we have not even begun to scratch the surface of what we can do to help someone heal at a soul's level. That was that integrative medicine piece was my first, I'm not going to say departure from Western medicine. I'm going to say it was an expansion of my Western medicine education. I took my really great Western medicine knowledge that I had been given and that I had spent time learning, and then enhanced it by adding, nutrition and exercise and nutraceuticals and microbiome and all of those things that we know can enhance that. And
Yeah.
that was really my stepping stone to where I am right now, which is getting back to the root cause of disease, which oftentimes begins with adverse childhood events, which with our thought forms and beliefs that we live with, which is part of what we call the default mode network, which is how your brain processes and functions on a day-to-day basis. And our default mode network is there to protect us from the world, but it also holds us back from learning exactly who we are and what our soul's purpose is.
So, okay, the thing that when I hear what you just said, what leaps out to me is these childhood experiences. We've all had them. So, what do we do about those childhood experiences so they don't explode into illness in later life? What can you do?
Well, we've gotten really good at compartmentalizing in our Western world. And what I didn't realize until I started my training in psychedelic therapy was how adverse childhood events, or ACEs, affect people's risk for not just cancer, but depression and chronic illness. And having now recognized that I've spent my 35-year career so far as a surgeon without really addressing those, like I knew that when my patients came in with cancer, all of their lifetime crap is unpacked. Like they might have a 4-piece set of luggage with their lifetime baggage of stuff. It gets unpacked during cancer. I mean, literally. And cutting out the cancer or radiating in chemo, that will treat the physical manifestations of the cancer. But how do you repack all that stuff that's now been unpacked? So that was the gift of me being a cancer surgeon all these years, is recognizing, you don't have to have been beaten or molested as a child to have events from your past become part of your processing network of how you live every day. But what it's given me is that gift to realize that, yeah, we still need to do what we need to do to treat the physical body. But if we can begin to address these issues in a different way, does that physical body then need that message of cancer to awaken its soul to understand why you're on the planet?
So is this where psychedelics come in?
It's where psychedelics, where breath work, where stimulation of the vagus nerve. And this is where when you gave my little intro there, the companies that I'm working with, people might say, well, how are they all connected? A non-narcotic pain patch. How is that connected to psychedelics, which is connected to breath work, which is connected to stimulation of the vagus nerve? Well, I got a very clear message in my meditation, how they're all connected, because we have an opioid crisis going on in the world. Everybody knows that.
Well, especially in the States. We don't have one here in the UK, I don't think. I don't
as
know.
not as bad. You
Yeah.
have it, but not nearly as bad.
Yeah.
But what happens is, when I do surgery and someone has a surgical procedure, and to be able to have an option to avoid narcotics for that postoperative pain is going to be a game changer. And that's what the non-narcotic pain patch, it can potentially do. I just had two people who were very, very important in my life have surgery, and surgery that typically involves pain medicine use these patches to be able to avoid narcotics. So if you can avoid those narcotics, 30% of the population is at risk for addiction just by pinging those receptors. So a lot of people live with chronic pain. Chronic pain then leads to depression and anxiety, and that leads to more medication. So that's how that's involved. The transcranial and the transcutaneous stimulation of the vagus nerve can help bring people out of fight or flight and back into rest and digest, which helps to rebalance the homeostasis of the body, bringing you back to a place where you're not reactive, but you can become gently responsive. The way psychedelics fit in is plant medicine, which has been around for thousands of years, can be utilized to help to allow someone's default mode network to stop running the program for that short period of time, to have an ability to access memories in a very safe container. So this is not about going out and dropping shrooms with your friends. This is about using, psilocybin, MDMA, using ayahuasca in an appropriate set and setting where you are actually in a place where someone can be appropriately monitored and guided through, and then integrate what they learn. And then that final piece is something that has been part of my life, and I know obviously part of yours with your trips to India. The yogic breathwork, the Vedic knowledge, the knowledge that we have with the utilization of our breath has the ability to get people to this place, but most people can't stop the chatter in their brain long enough to be able to do that breath work, which is so transformative. And that's where I'm working with Ishan Shivanand with Shiv Yoga to be able to utilize that breath work. So this isn't about someone needing a psychedelic forever. It's not about someone having been hooked up to a machine forever. This is about saying, okay, all of this can come back to this place where we've lived these cluttered lives, so fast-paced moving forward, that we're not actually being present in that moment. And so I believe that we're going to be able to create a huge shift. And it's funny because I wondered if I didn't listen correctly, and I just corrected the grammar of my first book, which instead of the healing consciousness, is it the healing of consciousness? Like, how do we allow our consciousness, our conscious beings, to actually be present and to figure out who we are at a soul's level?
So many questions, Beth. The first one is, how is taking psilocybin with you any different from taking shrooms with your mates? Or indeed, I believe you also work with ketamine, which I know, people take for fun as well. What's the difference between hanging out with your mates and doing that kind of stuff and doing it with someone who actually, has worked in this area? What's the difference?
Got it. So the way I'm stealing this from Ishan Shivanand, who said that if you would go and drop shrooms, drop acid, take ketamine, vitamin K, as I call it, recreationally, it's like having a tourist visa, where if you go to a country and you have a tourist visa and something goes bad, you may really end up in a bad place because you may not have a consulate to be able to help you. Okay. If you are a citizen of a country or a citizen of some place in the world where you have safeguards to protect you, if something goes bad, you have the opportunity to be able to have someone help you to work your way through it. A lot of people who have taken these recreationally have had no issues. But the problem is, if someone who has a history of psychosis has other comorbidities and medical issues like high blood pressure, diabetes, thoracic aortic aneurysm, there are so many contraindications to doing these medications that if it's not done in a setting, an experience where someone say, "Oh my God, I had a bad trip." If you have a bad trip, it doesn't mean that you didn't learn something to grow from it. But if you can't integrate that and move forward, you can end up in a kind of a hamster wheel pattern. And so that's why the training in psychedelic therapy is so important. It's why I believe, because of the war on drugs, like all of these drugs got basically labeled bad because of, I'm going to say, trips gone bad, where people had bad experiences, and then that was then taken to a place that, oh, they're all bad. And that's not the case. And so in order for us to be able to bring these life-changing plant medicines and entheogens back into a world where they're accepted across the board, we need to do it with the safeguards. We need to do it in the appropriate setting. And that's why the work that I'm doing, I think, is so important, because doing this in a research setting right now, until it's legalized, and then doing it in a therapeutic setting, is setting the stage for us to really be able to help so many people to get into a place of mental wellness.
So let's talk about the fact that, for example, psilocybin has basically been proven to be able to cure depression. Is that correct? Have I got that right?
It is a plant medicine that has clearly been shown to enhance one's ability to alleviate their depression. It's been done in clinical settings, but it's not legalized yet as, for depression. It's in the process of getting there. There are some states that have decriminalized it, but it clearly has shown that benefit. One of the reasons why it's so important
legalized
to me
in Australia, right?
Yeah, in Australia in July, MDMA and psilocybin have been decriminalized, and they will be able to be utilized, I believe, by psychiatrists only. It's not going to be by, a psychotherapist. And there's going to be a lot of guardrails in place with that. But that's setting the stage for this global process. But what people have to realize, it's not just about, in cancer patients, which is why I'm so interested in this, typical antidepressants that would be given as a prescription do not work. They're only as effective as placebo. So that's why, for me, this is such an important piece to be able to legalize this, particularly in cancer patients, because that existential crisis that comes from cancer is not a typical depression that somebody would be getting a pill for from their doctor. And because we know that it doesn't work, that's what makes this so important. Same thing with ketamine for refractory depression. We know that in a certain percentage of the population that have refractory depression, we are able to utilize this as a tool in our toolbox for mental wellness. So it's a very nuanced, emerging world. I'm going to the 2023 MAPS Psychedelic Conference, and I'm very excited about it, because this is where the global leaders are going to be coming together in order to really help us to begin this process of, okay, now that we're getting here, how do we maintain the safety? Because the efficacy is so good, like it's so effective, that we have to make sure that we have safeguards in place so that we don't end up going backwards to a time where people get fearful of, our collective consciousness expanding,
Hmm. Yeah, it's just a fascinating subject. So how did you get drawn into the world of psychedelics from Western medicine? Had you already, like, you'd already sort of got on the spiritual path and started noting the synchronicities and started realizing that there is more to life than meets the eye, and then it was sort of a natural progression? Because it is quite a leap.
Oh, it's a unbelievable leap. It's like jumping off the diving board in the deep end, not knowing whether there's water in the pool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that big. So in 2019, I was preparing for a lecture for the Healthy World Sedona conference on nutrition. I was giving a lifestyle modification lecture for cancer patients about cancer, and I love Michael Pollan's book Food Rules. So what happened was I was pulling some pictures off the internet, and I saw that he had published a new book a couple months earlier called How to Change Your Mind. And I thought, because he's written so much about nutrition, I thought it was How to Change Your Mind about Nutrition. And so I downloaded it on Audible and started listening to it as I'm driving to work in December of 2019. And here this guy's like talking about LSD and mushrooms. I'm like, oh my God, like, because I am a non-drug taker. Like, I am anti-drugs on so many levels. And it's so funny because I start listening to this and I'm going, oh my gosh, like, this guy's making compelling arguments, to the point that I actually got the book on Kindle so I could look at the references. And I started pulling out all the papers from Johns Hopkins with Bill Richards and stuff from Stan Groff and so many amazing, Dr. Ross and just, maps, looking at maps and all of the people who have been instrumental in this so-called movement. Once I pulled the scientific papers, started reading all the papers, started learning everything from these that I could, I was like, oh my God, where have I been? I have been so far off off this turnip truck of, I just felt like I was behind the times. Like, if this stuff is happening in cancer care and I don't know about this, why is that? So that's what started the process. So I actually, looked into the training program, and it's very funny because I was a psychedelic virgin. I had not done anything because obviously I have a medical license and didn't want to lose my license. And so had to go to places in the world where these are legal to actually experience it. I did that. And I will say, once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you actually have that knowledge in your consciousness of what's possible, you can't go backwards. And so for me, it was a natural progression. And now, I'm trained by CIIS, MAPS, and synthesis. And, my goal is to do research in this space to help facilitate journeys. I'm going to Mexico to get additional training because I want to be working with the veterans as a facilitator. And I feel really, I'm very, very passionate about this work, and we need to bring it mainstream. And sometimes it takes some of us mainstream doctors who have global credibility in their space to, pull the line and help, make that path so other people can help follow.
I've even seen Dr. Deepak Chopra attending conferences or speaking at conferences about psychedelics. So he must be I haven't heard him, but I've seen his name on the lineup. So he must be somewhat on board. Do you know about that?
He totally is. I met Deepak a couple times. I was at a conference with him last February down in Florida because we took our Mind Vibe, our Vegas technology down there for wellness, which he was also very thrilled about. And he was very excited that another Western trained doctor is interested in this. I think he'll probably be out at the conference with Rick Doblin and the whole crew out at the MAPS conference in Denver. But this is and it's more than a movement. It's a transformation in thought of how we help people heal at a much deeper level. So much of Western medicine is a pill for the ill. It's about just doing a quick fix, and we can't quick fix anything. We
Yeah.
can't do that anymore. We cannot rely on pharmacologic intervention to treat a symptom when the root cause is not being addressed. It's wrong. We just can't do it.
So what you're saying, for example, is that someone presents with breast cancer, that you give them the regular treatment of taking out the tumor and the
Yep.
radiation or chemo or whatever, but you also then give them psychedelic aftercare. Is that it, or before care, or during care?
Well,
Or...
what I'm proposing we do is the studies in cancer care have been done with end stage patients, which means people who are stage 3 or 4 that are very close to the end of their life. And what I believe is to do this work after someone has completed their tradition Western medical care. So they've done their surgery, chemo, radiation, whatever. At that point, do these trials with single dose psilocybin and then follow patients up for quality of life, for recurrence, for everything, because this is where I think we can have our biggest impact. And it's something that I believe is part of my calling as a physician to bring this to, to Western medicine.
And in a nutshell, Beth, are you saying that by having, say, a psilocybin journey after the, post-operatively for a breast cancer patient, for example, that it will help them avoid not have a recurrence?
That's why we have to do research, because you can't make any assumptions until you actually have prospective randomized data. And to do that, it's going to take several years. But what we do know is that stress plays a huge role in cancer care. We know that if patients are not sleeping well, eating well, exercising well, that they have a higher risk of recurrence. One of the factors that stops those healthy lifestyle attributes or changes is if someone can't get out of if their brain is constantly cycling and they're in fight or flight all the time, they're in high cortisol level, they're constantly in fear that their cancer is going to come back. I say we can cut cancer out, but if someone sits in their kitchen with their lights off waiting for their cancer to come back, I've not actually helped that patient heal. So one of the reasons why this research is so important is if we take these patients early on and do this single dose psilocybin and then follow these patients out for 5 to 10 years, that is how long this research is going to take to be able to come to fruition, to be able to know about recurrence. I know that we can tell quality of life right away, but I think that we need to shift gears. I mean, that's the name
But
of my second book. It's called Shifting
what
Gears.
is what is making you think that it has an effect? Is it because you're saying people who do the single dose psilocybin have a better quality of life, therefore they're going to be less stressed, therefore they're less likely to attract a recurrence? Well, there must be a reason, I'm sure. I know there must be. But what is the reason that's sort of pushing
Well,
you in that direction? What's the evidence so far, or what?
in a nutshell, that's it. Because after a diagnosis, when somebody kind of like wipes their hands and says, "Okay, my cancer's done. I'm going on with my life," and you don't actually take that look at, okay, where are your I call them opportunities for improvement. How can you live a better, more balanced life? If cancer doesn't change anything in your life, I always say it's just going to be waiting for another 2x4 to hit you upside the head. That cancer is a disruptive process in someone's life. So it's an opportunity to say, okay, how do you want to live the rest of your life? How do you want to be able to go forward? And in I have many patients who have made those major shifts. They've had those spiritual awakenings. They've had that deep dive into self-care that actually do better.
As a
We know
result of
that.
the psychedelics?
Well, no, as a result of those lifestyle changes, but a lot of people can't make those lifestyle moves because they're trapped in that default mode network. They're trapped in that drama in their head. And if you can take them out of their head, out of that drama, okay, and bring them into their heart, that 18 inches between your head and your heart is a very long distance when someone has cancer in particular. Because if you stay in that head space, but you don't get into that heart space, like when your heart opens, and that's one of the things that can happen with the psychedelics, with MDMA, with psilocybin, is to get to that place where you kind of get real with yourself. um, I won't know until we do the research whether my belief or whether my theory is correct. But that's why we do Western medical research, because in order to prove a theory, you have to do that scientific method to be able to get there. And that's one of the reasons why, I could go move to another country and be an underground therapist and just treat person by person by person. But to me, I think that one of the reasons why I have been brought on this path is to bring these two worlds together, is to create a connection in the universe to bring these worlds together.
But there must be some evidence, that you've seen or something that's making you, theorize like this. I mean, it's not just a complete shot in the dark that psychedelics
No,
are going to.
no, no, it's not a shot in the dark. It's when you look at research with cancer, with breast cancer patients, stage 2 and 3 cancer patients that actually adopt a healthy lifestyle, have psychosocial support, do yoga, or have mindfulness. We know stage for stage, grade for grade, they do better. But what I'm saying is, if someone can't get out of that cycle, and this is where psychedelics can help, because it can help with the depression and the anxiety, and we know that through clinical trials in patients that are depressed, to be able to help someone with cancer to alleviate that darkness, to alleviate that fear, to cut out that fear, then they can do the other things that are going to be able to help them have a healthier life and to be able to have a lower risk of cancer recurrence. That's where the connection is, because what I know from the research that's already been done in cancer care and the research that's been done into with depression, anxiety, and psychedelics, that's where I see the connection.
And then don't we then say, well, what about using it as a preventative?
Well, that's my theory, is that if we can do this in cancer patients, then why don't we address these issues much earlier on through a therapeutic process? There are a lot of people that go in that do therapy and spend 10 years of therapy, on a weekly basis with a therapist. And I'm sure you're aware of Brian Weiss in past life regression. Obviously, you read his intro in my book,
Yeah.
his foreword. When Brian first started doing past life regression, a lot of psychiatrists are like, well, why would I want to help somebody that quickly, because they're going to leave my practice and then it hurts their income. This is about physicians and therapists becoming healers at their core and recognizing there's so many people out there to heal. There's so many people out there to heal. And some of the technologies, that the transcranial technology we have, which absolutely helps treat anxiety and depression. I've had a therapist say, well, if we use that, then they're not going to need me. And I almost fell over because I'm thinking, really? So are you a therapist or are you a healer? I am a healer that chose to be a physician and a surgeon. I'm not a surgeon and a physician that is figuring out how to become a healer. I am a healer to my core. It is my calling. My job was being a doctor. My career was being a breast cancer surgeon, and my calling is being a healer. And that is why I'm being brought into these spaces, because when you are in flow with your calling, things begin to align in a way that are undeniable, and they just
Yeah.
show up.
And so what I agree 100%. What I'm wondering as well, around the world, we've seen marijuana being legalized and being called medical marijuana, and hasn't actually happened here in the UK, but it's happened obviously in quite a few states in the US. I know it's happened in Thailand because I was there quite recently, and there's suddenly, shops all over the place, coffee shops like in Amsterdam, and now it's legal in Malta. What do you think about that? Is that the same thing? Is that not the same thing? What do you think about that marijuana?
Well, I'm going to tell you that I there's a great book by Alex Berenson called "What to Tell Your Children." I think that's the name of it. And it's a book about marijuana. I do not believe, and this is my own personal belief, not anybody else's. I do not believe that marijuana should be legal for someone until they have reached the age of about 26, because our brains are so immature at that point. And there's definitely associations with a certain percentage of people having psychotic breaks. I believe marijuana has a very important place in healthcare. I believe that CBD, CBN those receptors are right there for the treatment of a lot of things, for immune issues. Marijuana and THC in the marijuana is the real, that's the psychoactive component. And I was not a fan of the mass legalization of marijuana. That's just that's my personal opinion. It's as a drug, it has wonderful capabilities, like in cancer patients, the Marinol, that's the prescription form of it. THC can be wonderful in cancer patients. So the medical utilization of marijuana, 100%. And I'm not saying that marijuana should be illegal, but I have concerns with our youth, kids, teenagers into their mid-20s. I really believe that we put a lot of people at risk by having it legalized at that age. So the legalization of marijuana to me is different than the utilization of psilocybin and MDMA and the entheogens, because marijuana has not been allowed to be studied, just because, the number of studies for treatment of depression, anxiety, to me it's different. It's some people use marijuana to medicate their anxiety, and I get that. They're completely, they're very different. They're very different aspects of plant medicines.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to get marijuana um, lovers mad at me. I believe that there is a place for it. I believe that it should be legalized, but I think there should also be some guardrails. Just because I wouldn't want my kids smoking it as teenagers or in their mid-20s. If a 30-year-old son of mine said, "Hey, I want to smoke marijuana," I'm not going to stop him, because at that point his brain is developed and whatever. But for the mass populations, I think it's just like, I don't believe that psychedelics should be widely legalized recreationally, because they're such amazing windows to your soul, that I believe that until we have more work in this space where it's legalized in a clinical setting, I just have concerns that we could lose something so valuable to our health and well-being, and I don't want to see that happen.
And what about if, an 18-year-old person comes to you terribly anxious and depressed? Are they too young for a psilocybin treatment?
Well, the first thing I would do with an 18-year-old, because of the work that I'm doing, is I would have them use our vagus stimulator from Mind Vibe. I would start with something non-invasive.
What
And
is
then I
that
would
exactly? Is that a machine?
it's a electroceutical technology. Interstill Health is the parent company. It is a non-invasive technology that stimulates the vagus nerve, on two points on their earlobes and two places on the right side of the neck and the inner ear. And those 5 25-minute sessions have the ability to take someone out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. If someone's anxious, their sympathetic nervous system is typically overloaded. So it helps to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps bring them into alignment. And that technology is out. It's just getting commercially launched next week in Boca Raton, Florida. We're going to be doing a clinical trial in
I'm going
addiction
to
here
be
in
in Florida
Pennsylvania.
next week.
No way. What city are you
Yes,
going
well,
to be in?
I'm probably be left by the time you get there. I'm going tomorrow.
Oh, well, when you come to Sedona in October, I will have you try it. But it's something that it's not just for people that are anxious or depressed. I think, for executive functioning, I mean, I know I sleep better with it. This is going to be it's a wellness technology. So it's really about creating homeostasis in our body. So you say about an 18-year-old doing mushrooms, yet to be seen. Most of the research has been done in older populations.
Mm.
But I believe that there are many tools in our toolbox. One of the first things that I would try to do with a teenager who is anxious is to try to get them to learn to be able to be comfortable with their breath, and that's where the yogic meditation comes in as well. So
So,
it's not
yeah,
one size fits
sorry.
all.
Yeah. So, Beth, do you think that, what's your feeling about the future of medicine? Do you think more and more people are going to start to say, well, maybe you should try breath work, rather than maybe you should try lithium or whatever, you know?
I think that we are right now, post COVID, we are at an inflection point in healthcare where we need to really focus on treating chronic illness with sustainable, appropriate means of affecting the root cause. The root cause of obesity is not a genetic issue, basically. We've become a society of obesity because we're stressed. Some people eat too much, they don't exercise enough, and it gets progressive process where what is someone medicating with the food? What are they actually trying to do? Is that comfort in food? I know in my family it is. I mean, we grew up like that. It's something that food was always comfort. And so as we start to begin to look at chronic illness, obesity has replaced tobacco as our number one health issue. And so, we as a society have to say, okay, how do we become healthier as a society? How do we make health and wellness a priority? And so we have to have Western medicine for treatment of acute disease, absolutely, bar none. And I'm not telling people not to get their surgery, chemo, and radiation for cancer. I'm not telling someone to not get a joint replacement when they need it. But what I'm saying is, every time that
You're
we
also
have,
not telling them to go out and take mushrooms.
correct, you just don't go take mushrooms. It's not a panacea. It's not a magic bullet. It is a tool in the toolbox. And we've gotten so far down this road of medicalization of everything, and the pill for the ill and the quick fix, that taking that step backwards to say, okay, how do we get people who live in food deserts to be able to have healthy food to eat? And how do we inspire them or help them to understand the importance of that? So, I wish I had an easy answer to all of this. I am kind of staying in my little world of cancer care with psychedelics, because as we are able to help this population improve the efficacy of our treatments, we're going to be able to then create the opportunity for those individuals to help change their children, their grandchildren, and their communities.
Yeah, and when I hear that, though, I just think, but it has to be, looked at as a preventative as well, because
Absolutely.
otherwise you just, it's after the horse has bolted. But, and that's where the whole big pharma wanting everybody to get sick because then they need all their drugs. That's, that's the whole, and it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact.
No, prevention is key. And
Yeah.
listen, I'm going to have the biggest target on my back from big pharma, because I'm going after the narcotics and the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I'm going after the antidepressants, anxiolytics, and sleepers. And those are not small ticket items. It's a massive, massive, market.
Isn't it like $1 trillion
Oh, I don't know. It's probably more than that. It's unbelievable. Just the fact that, I have friends and family who have used Signal Relief, our non-narcotic pain patch. They've used this pain patch to alleviate the need for narcotics. And I have some doctors saying, oh, well, it's a placebo. Well, in our clinical trial, we've already proven it's way beyond placebo effective. That's why I now have to do a prospective randomized, pivotal placebo-controlled trial to get through the FDA. And then when I get to the FDA, it depends who's in charge there. And this is where, hopefully, because of the war on drugs right now, the war on opioids, I'm hoping that Congress, who funds the FDA, is going to be smart enough to say, hey, listen, they can't block this, because this one technology has the ability to potentially shift healthcare in so many ways. Can you imagine that going into surgery and coming out with your pain patch on, not needing any narcotics? Do you think that's going to be a big change? Increasing mobility, like someone that has to have a joint replacement? It's a big deal.
Yeah. It also,
I'm meeting with some
the thing that
next
occurs
week.
to me is women who have cesareans, because the last thing you want are all the drugs going around your body when you're first breastfeeding your kid.
And it works amazingly on postoperative incisions.
Amazing. Well,
it's a big deal. It's all good stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely something. It's definitely a thing to watch. It's going to develop. And
Yasmin, I'm going to tell you, I just had my next 2-year reading with my Vedic astrologer. It's all in my chart. It's all there. It is all there, my dear.
Right. Well, I'm going to see you in October. We can talk more.
I can't wait.
Beth, we've got 5 copies of your book that we can give people a link to. How do we do that? Do we just put it in the show notes, or
you can put it in the show notes, and if you email me their email addresses. I think I already copied and pasted them to you. So yeah, you just
I'll
copy
put
and
something
paste
in the
them.
show notes for anybody who wants to get a free link to read the book. And otherwise, they can find you on your website, correct? Dr. Beth DuPree, DuPree, and you are in Sedona.
Yep.
All right. Well, stay on the line. I'm going to bid you farewell from our recording. So thank you for being here. And
thank you for having me.
Anybody who's got any questions, go to Beth's website. It's a fascinating paradigm smashing area, in my humble opinion. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks for having me, Yasmin. I'll see you soon.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Mainly Moonology podcast. If you'd like to stay updated with the moon and moonology and astrology and all the other things we cover, be sure to subscribe to the podcast via Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You'll be notified whenever a new episode is up. Also, it would mean a lot to me and my team if you could leave us a glowing 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, please. That actually helps more people find us too, which spreads the love and surely also brings you amazing karma for taking a moment to help us out and to help other people find the podcast. Have a great week, and I hope to speak to you next week. Lots of love.